Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again with another live. We've got Christy with us. Christy, thank you so much for being our guest today. I'm just going to have you kind of introduce yourself and tell us what kind of experience you have in the dental field. I've heard that maybe you've been around it for a little bit. So tell us a little bit about your dental history.
Well, not to say that I'm old or anything, but I have been in the dental field for getting closer now to 35 years. Gosh, now that really does sound old. But I have been fortunate enough that through my career, I've had two stellar practices that I've worked for. So I've gained a lot of my experience that way, and also taken the initiative to learn more outside of my scope. And I still love it. 35 years into it, I'm still loving it and still hanging into it. Been through several economic challenges through the years and that I've been in dentistry. Nothing quite like we're dealing with now, but having been through it, you kind of know how to navigate through it, even though it's a little different.
That's very true. So before we go on with some of my specific questions I have, in addition to your history and experience running some very successful dental practices, you've also done a lot with coaching. So you actually help, in addition to your main practice, you actually help other practices also, correct? So you have more than just your two main fields. Is that right?
That's right. So last year, I decided that it was time to take my career and my expertise to a different level, and so I started my own company, Leap to Solutions, and the word Leap stands for lead, engage, align, and perform, and those have always been my four key words that I lean on in managing and in the leadership role that I have. So that was just a natural thing for me. It was like I just named the business off the core words of what I do. And so I've been very fortunate through COVID that a lot of practices that had never had any coaching at all found themselves in a situation that they needed help. And fortunately, I have been there to help them and get them through a closure, a restart, and now pivoting towards 2021 and success and setting goals and mapping out where you want to go from that point. So I'm very happy with the way, the path of my career is changing. And so I'm doing both, still working as a practice manager and doing this. And that's kind of like my 2 to 3 year plan, is to kind of do both for a while.
Awesome. Well, that's why we're so excited to have you join us, because I know that we have a long-standing relationship. We've worked together for a long time. But for our audience that's watching, we get to grab your expertise, and basically they all get a little free coaching today. So thank you so much for being willing to help us out. So during this economic downturn that we're seeing right now, kind of the ups and downs, like you mentioned, throughout your years of dentistry, you've seen several of them. We've had a couple of scary moments in the economy over the last few years, or 30 years especially. But can you tell me, just when you're coaching practices, what are some proactive steps that you recommend they take now to prepare for thriving, continuing on? Most of them have maybe survived. Obviously, they've survived phase one, but now we're looking at 2021, and some of them are still a little scared and a little anxious about what the future looks like. So can you give me just a couple of things that they can do to be proactive?
So for me, what's always worked for me, and I got this from from one of my bosses that was a long-term mentor for me before where I'm landed at now. It's always to look backwards as to what had happened or what transpired in the 12 months, prior to where you're at now, and start looking at what worked and what didn't work. And then isolating the things that didn't work. Well, what were the key components? What do we need to shift? And that's what I do with the people that I'm coaching now, the doctor's office that I'm working with. We started sitting down in October all the way through November, and we are planning for 2021. But before we even get started, we're doing the snapshot of the year 2020. What went well? and what are some things that we need to shift or change so that we don't get blindsided in 2021 or as we're moving forward. I think that's very important because a lot of times we're looking towards the future that we're not taking time to look at what really didn't work, as we navigated through the year. And that's always been key to our success here, is seeing that we were doing something and we were thinking it was getting results and it wasn't. Okay, right. So do we want to continue that path and try to change something to make it fit? But sometimes it's like trying to take a square and shove it in a circle and it just doesn't fit. So you have to know when to say, okay, we need to scrap this. We need to move on and do something different.
Right. So in the offices that you've worked with and coached, I know your practice is very experienced at being proactive. But I have noticed in some of the conversations I've had with practices, and I'm wondering if you're getting the same experience, that that's not necessarily the norm. A lot of practices don't plan proactively as much as they can, and they're being reactive throughout the year to whatever's coming. Do you see that a lot? And what would be your advice to the ones that are working on reaction mode?
So that is an obstacle that I am encountering, and because I've worked in this a very long time, and I also had like a 2-year stint in between my dental career that I worked in a medical field, and they were much like that too. They were very reactive to crisis. They were always in a crisis management, reacting to the crisis at hand instead of being proactive. And so I when I sit down with them, as much like I sat down with the owners here, is you have to plan for success. It's not going to come easy. It's not just going to be given to you, and it's going to be hard to plan. But you've got to put the time in. You've got to develop your roadmap. So what I found is a lot of practices they can only do 1 year. And when I'm trying to say, okay, let's do 1, 3, 5, 10, they get so overwhelmed. And it's easy for me because I've done it in my personal life, and I do that also with the practices I work here. That's how I was trained. But I am very, I understand that it's difficult for people. So I try to gear my enthusiasm, because when I walk in, I can kind of see where I did a skills analysis, and my top skill is strategist. So when I'm going in, I'm already seeing where you can be in 3 and 5 years. Yeah. But you're not there yet. So I have to kind of gear it back and take the baby steps and just say, okay, in this year, looking back at last year, what are the things you wanted to accomplish last year that we didn't do? And let's carry them over so that we kind of are getting a start point, and then just working with them from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important piece that a lot of practices maybe are not implementing just because they don't know how. That they have the desire, but they've never done it, and they've never been shown. And often, if the doctor is not a strong leader, the team may just not know where to begin. So those are great tips to remind all of our administrators that even if they don't have the doctor that's taking the leadership role, they can help the doctor work with them and become stronger in their planning and in their strategy and in their looking forward, because maybe the doctor does need a little bit of coaching to say, let's just take the time to sit down and talk this through so that we can strategize. And so I think it's nice that you remind everyone almost to give the admin staff the permission to have those open conversations, to be able to get it going.
And that is a good, you perfectly led me into this next thing. So in the practice that I'm in now, 2 years after I got here, there was a transition with the associates becoming the owners. They're young doctors. They hadn't been out of school very long. They're all of a sudden, they are saddled with owning a business, running a business. And so I was their coach. I've been their coach internally for a very long time. And so I had to do the same steps that I'm doing with other offices, easing them into this. And now I'm laughing because I hear them coaching their colleagues, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's my gig here. But it's important I'm very fortunate enough that the two doctors, the owners here, we are different in our mindsets and our approach, but together we unite and we are a united front in leadership. One is stronger than the other. Obviously, we've got three people and our personalities are different. The way we look at things are different. We agree to disagree on things. We agree to compromise at times. And we can certainly say, I made a bad decision on that. I should have listened to you. And that's important for all managers, is to try to have that trust-based relationship with your doctor. Sit down and talk with them one-on-one and try to figure out what in their mind, where they want to go, because you can't help them if they don't tell you, this is my vision. And a lot of dentists don't know. A lot of business owners do not know where they want to be in a year, let alone 3, 5, and 10 years from now.
That's a very fair point. You can't work on what you don't know, so you have to be able to write it down first, or at least vocalize it first. So if you had one tip that you've learned over the years that you would share with a practice administrator or manager, what would it be? What would the one kind of takeaway that you think they could start with so that they're not overwhelmed?
I think is just developing that communication with your doctor owners. That is important, because we don't have anybody to vent to except the other managers within ADOM or in our local chapters, or friends in dentistry, or our spouses. But there are things business related that you need to be able to talk with your doctors about. And it's important now more than ever, because I see it all over the forums. Us managers are burnt out, or we're feeling overwhelmed. We've got team members that didn't come back. We've got team members that are now deciding to leave. We've got all this additional work and responsibility. It's more than it ever has been because of PPP loans, and now they're looking for the forgiveness part of it. So you're dealing with that part. But you got to sit down and you got to talk with your docs. And I did it. It's not a sign of weakness. I just sat down with mine and I'm like, I'm really trying to be positive, and you see that. But what you're not seeing is that I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed and burnt out a little bit. And that was happening around September and October. And just having that conversation, and then they, knowing that they were feeling the same. But they've got their shield of armor up, like we all do, we're strong, we got this. But the reality is, we're going home at night and we're venting on social media, on the manager's forum or wherever it is, I'm overwhelmed, my staff doesn't know, blah, blah, blah. Well, your doctors don't know if you don't tell them. Like mine, like, well, you come in every day and you're happy. Well, yeah, it's supposed to be. But I'm overwhelmed. So I think that's important, because your mental well-being is a very key component to how you lead and how you engage and align and perform with your staff. Lee, notice how I did that, honey?
I caught that. That was pretty good.
It's wine time, sister. Anyway, it's very important that you're physically well, emotionally well, and mentally well. And sometimes you just have to talk things out. And the doctors need to know that it's a safe place within the leadership team for them to talk and say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. This is going on, because where somebody is weak, the other person is strong, and they help each other, pull each other along, and that's just the beauty of life. But they won't know unless you talk about it. And I'm rambling again.
I love that you said that it's not a sign of weakness to have open communication, because I think that's such an important reminder for our practice administrators, our managers, who are putting on the brave face. They are staying positive. They are kind of the frontline warriors, and to remind them that it's okay to have that open line of communication, that candid conversation with the right team, with the right person. You don't want to be, like you said, you don't want to be sharing it with the team members in general that can't solve the problems, but have those open conversations with your doctors and say, this is where I'm at, and let's put all of our minds together and figure out what our solution is and how the practice can continue to grow, because I do think that that is contributing to some of the burnout that we hear about, is that they try to take too much on. So I love those reminders for them to just keep the lines of communication open and, kind of call mercy at times when you need to and say, what support can we have here? We have lots of people on our team. Where can we share the load, and where can we distribute things so that we can stay on path and not burn out? So those are great advice.
And then, when I hope that a lot of you out there that are watching today have taken this time in the latter part of the year and sat down and did your planning for the upcoming year and checking to see with a pulse, if you have your 3, 5, and 10 year, where you are on trend for that. And then as you start the new year, if you aren't having leadership meetings with your doctors, it's important that you do that every week or every 2 weeks. Don't wait a month, because things pile up. You need to start having those conversations and reviewing where you're at with your goals and your business. And also, if you haven't set your fees for the new year, this is the time you want to start looking at that, where you're going to raise your fees and getting all the data to support that, and just being ready to come out of the gate on January 2021 and be ready, be on that path to success. Don't wait to do your fees in February or March. Start out in January and be prepared.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think Whitney, who's organizing our live here, can pop your information into the chat. So if anybody wants a little consulting and a little support on their end, they'll know who to contact and who to get some moral support from, or if they need to, throw in the white flag a little bit and say, no, I need a little more help on our team, then they'll know who to call and get some advice on how to plan better and get 2021 their strongest year. But thank you so much for joining us today. I love your advice. It's been very helpful. I hope that all of our administrators and managers are listening today and can grab a little nugget from it and plan for 2021 and make it a less stressful year than 2020 was.
That's right. We have to think positive, and we're all in this together. And I don't know about you, but I am just looking forward to a fresh start in 21 and for it to be successful. And just look at it this way. Whatever you've gotten through, all that you thought you would never have to deal with in this year, and you're still standing, and you're still strong, and you're still wearing your warrior. You've got your shield up, so you can accomplish anything. So if you just need to talk it out. But, we got this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christy.
Sure.
It was awesome. Bye.
Bye, darling.